Hello and welcome to today's topic of the differences between Web2 and Web3 marketing. If you're a Web3 founder or you're a marketer, maybe transitioning from Web2 to Web3, or maybe you're already working in Web3, you're going to understand this stuff on a very deep level once you're done listening or watching this, and it's going to allow you a much better chance of being successful with a Web3 project. Also, before I dig in, I'm starting a Discord for people who want to know more about this topic. I'm also writing a book on Web3 marketing and growth. And so if you want more information about that, you will find it later on in this video, or if you're listening audio. Without further ado, let's dig into today's topic. There's basically two main components to this thing. So the first thing that you need to understand as far as the differences between Web2 and Web3 goes when it comes to marketing is to understand that the fundamental incentive structure is different. I ran my own business for about a decade. The last business that I ran was a consulting company, very much Web2, right? It was all about customer acquisition. We would get customers, we would sell them consulting, and we would help them with their business. When that company did well, the only people that benefited from the fact that the company was doing well was myself and my partner, right? And this is the case with Web2 companies. I would say that publicly traded companies that are on a stock market, they are much more like a Web3 project in the sense that stockholders are also gaining value from, let's say, the increase in a token price. But in Web2, let's say 99.9% of the businesses, the smaller to medium-sized businesses, the only people that benefit from the project or the company doing well are the people that actually have ownership, right? So, of course, the fundamental difference here is that in Web3, the people that benefit from the project doing well is usually a lot more people. This is going to depend a little bit on sort of what type of Web3 project it is. There's like different types of DAOs. You got Bitcoin, and I'm not getting into an argument of, the value that Bitcoin has in the sense of the opportunities that it created. But if you really look at just the product, it is really just a coin, right? So there's those types of projects. You got blockchain ecosystems, Polkadot, Ethereum, Near, whatever the case may be. You got gaming, DeFi, exchanges, NFTs. So they're different. An exchange is a hybrid, really. It's sort of a Web2 / a Web3 project, whereas, let's say, an NFT drop is pure Web3, okay? And so the fundamental difference here is the incentive structure. So again, if you take, let's say, a full-blown Web3 project, in Web2, the only people that benefit from the project are the owners of the company, usually not that many people. In Web3, let's say an NFT project, everybody benefits from the success of the project. Everybody, let's say, who holds an NFT, let's say we're talking about a 10,000, PFP NFT project, everybody who owns one of the NFTs is going to benefit from the success of the project because the floor price is going up, right? This is the fundamental difference about, the incentive structure. Now, what does that mean? That's cool. That's pretty self-explanatory or obvious. If you spend 3 minutes thinking about it, you can see that. But what's interesting about that is it's going to change what you should do, what you need to focus on to have success. So that's important, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But, fundamentally, what's really awesome if you are a marketer, it's really going to make your job a lot easier, because inherently, if everybody who is a customer is also an evangelist who is incentivized to go out there and spread the word, then that's going to make your life a lot easier. So in Web2, a lot of your success was really, it would come down to your ability to go out there and acquire a new customer, right? Because if you were able to do that, then even if you were starting from zero, but you were able to go out there and get a customer, you could get going, right? Or if you were in business for a while, COVID hit and sort of ruined things for you. Well, if you're able to go out there and get a new customer, you're able to kind of at least, come back from that. And then, of course, there are other things that contribute to the long-term success of a business in Web2. But if you were able to do that, then you were really in a good position. And so a lot of the activities that a marketer would do in Web 2 was sort of like creating offers, running paid advertising, email marketing, creating sales funnels, and that sort of thing. And in some cases, that will still be relevant in a Web 3 project, but that is not the bulk of what you're doing as a marketer in Web 2, right? So in Web 3, what's interesting as far as the activities that you need to focus on as a marketer, it's really about the sort of perception of the value. And I've made a video about this before where I kind of broke down, the two components or the two ingredients that make up the, price of a token, which is really the intrinsic value plus the perceived value. And this is what's interesting about your work as a Web3 marketer. A lot of your work, as opposed to the creation of the offers and the advertising and the email marketing and sales funnels, it's a lot more about creating the perceived value. And there's a lot of things that maybe you should not do because of the negative effect that it would have on the perceived value. I just had a consultation yesterday with a project where, they're raising funds and they were sort of doing two approaches at the same time. They were approaching, VCs, and they were also thinking about doing an NFT drop as a way to raise funds for the project. And I said, those both work, but you got to be very careful. If you do the NFT drop and it doesn't pan out, the sentiment of the market is not the greatest, okay? There's a lot of projects that are not selling out. The hype of the sort of, 10,000 PFP NFT project, that has much died down and may come back, who knows? But here's the reason why I told them to just be mindful of this is, if you're doing both of these, not only are you splitting your attention, but also if you go out there and you try to do this NFT thing to raise money, it fails, and then you have to go to VCs, and they ask you about your NFT launch, and you got to tell them that, hey, it didn't sell out, or like, hey, we only sold X amount. That is terrible for the value perception, okay? Of course, you don't want that to happen. So you have to be very mindful about activities that are going to increase the perceived value of what you're doing. And you also have to be equally, if not more, careful about what negative signals you are potentially sending that could damage the perceived value of your project. All right? So I like to say that Web 2 was about getting them to buy, and Web 3 is about getting them to buy in. Meaning, Web 2 is all about customer acquisition, right? Get them to buy the product. Web 3 is all about getting them to buy into the project. Do they believe in the vision? Do they believe in the team? Do they believe in the longevity of the business model? Get them to buy in psychologically. If you achieve that, they might not ever buy, but they'll tell 12 other people about it, and maybe 6 of them will buy. So Web 2 is about getting people to buy. Web 3 is about getting people to buy in. All right. So it's much more a psychological thing, and it very much comes down to value perception. Okay. So that's really the main difference of the first component. And this is all due to this sort of different incentive structure. And like I said, there are also hybrids, exchanges. They still need very sort of classical customer acquisition marketing. They're just, selling a service. They get you in. You buy a token. They take a fee from that. They also have other types of things that they do. But the business model is very much Web 2. But then you add the token into the equation, and now you have this sort of hybrid thing going on, right? And that's cool. That's great. I mean, as a marketer, I'm loving it because you get to do both things, and they all kind of work in tandem together. So that's really the first thing that you got to understand when it comes to the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 marketing. So the incentive structure is totally different in a good way. Marketers should be extremely excited about this. The next component is that if you think about Web 2, product used to be the competitive advantage. But now, due to the nature of Web 3, a lot of product is open source, and a lot of product can be forked like that. So if you used to be able to make the best product, and basically your whole company lived and died off of the fact that you had the best product in the marketplace, then that was great. And I think the iPhone is probably the number one example that comes to mind, right? They made a product where the hardware and the software was made by the same company. Everything just works, right? it was the best product. And they were also first. They were not first with the smartphone, but they were really first in pulling it off in the way that they did, the way that they packaged everything up, and they just crushed it on the product side. Okay, that's why they have a lot of the success that they still experience today. But again, in Web3, a lot of product is open source. So how does this change things? Well, if you're openly inviting people to come over and literally copy your product, then that can no longer be the competitive advantage, right? If you have this thing, it's some kind of platform, and it's crushing it, but then there's 15 copies of that tomorrow, all of them, coming for your user base, then of course something has to change here. What is the thing that's going to make a difference in terms of the long-term success of a project if it's not the product? Well, it's two things. Well, before I tell them, you want to take a guess? I think you can guess at least one of them. All right, I'll give it to you. So the two things that you really have to focus on if you're interested in having long-term success of the project, of a Web3 project, and I'm making an assumption here that the product is fantastic, okay? Because that's par for the course. That's minimum to get a seat at the table. The two things that you need to focus on are brand and community. And some of you are like, oh yeah, I've heard those terms before. Oh yeah, I know what that means. Do you though? Here, I'm listening. Why don't you tell me right now? Teach me, how do you build a strong brand? How do you build a strong community? Not so easy anymore, right? And the reason I'm being kind of facetious about that is that I've had a lot of conversations with people who have a lot of experience in crypto and don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to brand and community. So I'll start with brand, and then we'll go to community. And what I would like to achieve here is I would like to give you a practical way to think about this. And what I mean by that is basically that needs to fulfill two requirements. One, you need to understand it to the point where you could sort of explain it to other people. And the second thing is that you need to be able to use it. Like, you need to be able to take the understanding that you have of it, use that to come up with an idea, execute on it, and through that, build a stronger brand, kind of a thing. So the way that I think about brand is, let's say Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. You and I walk into a store both to buy Coca-Cola or Pepsi. They have both. Are you going for the Coke? I'm pretty sure you're going for the Coke, because I'm going for the Coke and most people are going for the Coke. Why? Well, that's the interesting part. Why are we going for the Coke? Actually, that's not the interesting part. Without the asterisk. The asterisk is that, you may know this already, Pepsi wins the taste test, the blind taste test that they've done multiple times. Pepsi is the better product. So why do we go into a store and choose Coca-Cola over Pepsi if Pepsi is the better product? If they had no labels, then we would go for the Pepsi. You throw the label on it. Now we go for the Coke. Why is that? That is interesting. To me, that is, as a marketing nerd, that is like one of the most exciting things you could ever ask me, because I'm like, that's super interesting. That's super interesting. So the difference, I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore. The difference is, and this is what branding is how you make somebody feel. So for me, probably for you as well, Coca-Cola, even though we're not conscious of it, we're not thinking about it all the time, we're not thinking about it when we're reaching for the Coke, they have been programming us for many years to associate Coca-Cola with happiness. I think of the big, massive red truck during Christmas, like that ad. I associate Coca-Cola with happiness. Pepsi is a better product. I have no association with Pepsi whatsoever. They have failed at tying their product to a feeling that beats Coca-Cola, right? So Coca-Cola equals happiness. Pepsi just equals, the product, just the cola, right? There's no perceived additional value. It's just the intrinsic value. So that's a really great way actually to tie it back to what I spoke on earlier, which is the intrinsic value plus the perceived value. So Pepsi only really has the intrinsic value. They have failed to add some additional perceived value, whereas Coca-Cola has slightly less intrinsic value because, again, Coca-Cola does not win the taste test. It is an inferior cola when compared to Pepsi. So the intrinsic value is slightly less, but because of the perceived value added on top, they actually win that race with Pepsi. And so that's really fascinating. So let me get you a quote here to kind of help bring this point home. So Maya Angelou said, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And so this is something that you should be thinking about as far as your brand goes. And maybe it's not a physical product, but what does aligning with your brand mean for them? What does that make them feel? What does it make them feel to say that they are part of your project? So how do you make people feel? That's really it. And, it's a very interesting topic because as we're just about to talk about, and this will probably help you when it comes to branding, because you might think like, well, what should I want them to feel? And this is where it really sort of ties into community. And so bear with me for a minute here. I'm going to give you a list of different things that you should want them to feel, because it'll really, they're very primal desires. And I'll give you a list, and the one that sort of makes the most sense in terms of like the brand that you have and what you're trying to build, that's the one you should double down on, and that's the one that you should try to make it so that they feel this thing when they are part of your project. Now, on to community. So that is branding, okay? It is not about the logo, it's not about blah, blah, blah. It's about how you make them feel, okay? Community, let's start with what community is not, because I have very much a love-hate relationship with this term community. It is completely overused in the crypto space. 99.99% of people do not actually know what it means. They confuse it specifically with two other things that it is not. I had a call with a venture capital firm that was an investor in the last project that I was involved in Web3. And I realized through this call that here's this guy, he's been doing crypto for a long time. He's successful, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, here's how we grow community, blah, blah, blah. And I realized that he was using the term community interchangeably with the term social media followers. They are not the same thing, okay? Social media followers, I am not against by any means. Come back to the perceived value. As a marketer, I absolutely understand that there's a ton of value in somebody seeing the social proof in a lot of other people, especially real followers, following another person, following another project. That has value, but it is not community, okay? The second thing that community gets confused with, that it is also not, and this was so cringe. I remember when I saw this tweet and I sent it to a bunch of people because I'm like, oh God, this is just so, it was so tone deaf and so off that it was just cringe. Now, I can't remember if it was Voyager or Celsius, but as you know, these are two exchanges. They both froze withdrawals not that long ago and completely screwed over their customers. And the CEO, I forget again which one it was, but he basically came out and said, yeah, we got to do this, but thank God, we have such a loving, supportive community that we're going to get through this together. And then the comment section is all people, asking for their money back. You've completely screwed over your customers. They've entrusted you with their money, and you mismanaged their money, and you froze it. You froze their money. A lot of people lost a lot of money through that. And that is not community. What you have, like neither Voyager nor Celsius had a great community going. What they were confusing the word with was customers. And so if you read those comments, you see all these people asking for their money back. And he's saying, we have a very supportive community who like understands this difficult time that we have to go through. There's a complete mismatch between what he is, the picture that he's painting of the community, and the actual people. And so there was really no bond between the customers and those exchanges. It was just they offer a service, they were using the service, there was nothing else there, okay? It was not a strong, supportive community, absolutely not, okay? So community is not social media followers, and community is not customers. But community is, and I like to think, again, in practical examples that I think we can all relate to, if you've ever been on a motorcycle, when two bikers pass each other on the road, they wave to each other. Bikers have a they have biker bars. Bikers have jackets that show I'm a biker, and they've got even little gangs or even just non-criminal sort of little sub-communities, and they're signaling to others that they're part of this group and whatnot. But that is not what it's built on. Those are some of the components of a community, but they are also quite surface level. The thing that a community is built on, that if you mess all the things that I just mentioned, if you mess all those up, but you get this other thing right, you will have a chance of building a very strong, successful community. And if you do all the things right of the examples that I just spoke on, as far as like maybe you have like a biker bar, maybe you have like swag, but you miss this one component, this one ingredient, then chances of you building a strong community, an actually strong community, are basically non-existent. And so what communities are actually built on are archetypes, or a core desire. It's an identity. They're built around a group of people that are gathering together in some way, shape, or form, and they are all on the same journey. And what that typically means is we have to go back to the 1950s and look at Carl Jung's work on archetypes. So archetypes, he came up with these 4 different variables, and through that he was sort of like, I think he had sort of a spectrum for each variable, and for all the psychoanalysis that he did for each person, he could sort of place them like, okay, you are here, blah, blah, blah. In any case, they extrapolated 11 different archetypes from the work that he did on this topic. And here's the thing. Each archetype basically has one core desire. They have this one thing where every decision that they make in life, which they are usually fully unaware of, it's all subconscious at this point because they've been wanting it for so long, but they basically optimize everything. Every decision that they make, they optimize for this one thing. And if you can figure out, and I'll give you a list here very shortly, if you can figure out the one that makes the most sense for you, you can really start to build on that. And you're going to find that when you bring 2 people in a room together that are on the same journey, they are going to have this bond that, like I said, if you get all those other things right, they just won't have that bond. They'll have other surface level things in common, but I'm sure that you can remember meeting a person in your life who go, holy crap, this guy or this girl, whether it's a friend or a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, are completely like, they want the exact same things in life that I want. Anyway, let's go through the list. I think you get the concept, right? So I'm going to give you some movie examples for each one so that you can really, it'll help drive the point home for each one. So, and don't get too caught up in what I'm calling these, because I've pulled this list from the internet. I don't know if this is what, Carl Jung called it. But the innocent is the first one. And what the innocent crave above all else is happiness. And the movie that comes to mind is The Beach. So this is Leo DiCaprio, who travels to Thailand. He gets in all kinds of weird situations. He takes on a lot of risk. I have this memory of him sort of jumping off a cliff, like very high risk stuff. He just wants to be happy. That's what he's optimizing for. And he's willing to make those other things secondary, like risk and so on and so forth. So if happiness, and this comes back to Coca-Cola, right? If that is what your community is about, then you should be thinking about the language that you're using, the experiences that you're putting together, the messaging that you're using, the graphics that you're doing, the content that you're making. You see where I'm going? It all comes back to reinforcing this one central idea, the one core desire. The second one is the orphan. The orphan wants more than anything else just security and belonging. And the movie that comes to mind is Superbad. You remember how Jonah Hill and his buddy, I can't remember his name, they just wanted to be part of the group, like just want to be part of the high school cool kids club, basically. They wanted to be part of the parties, they wanted to get laid, like they just wanted to be part of it. And they were just so outside that group, and they just, that's what the whole movie was about. Like they're transitioning through this process of trying to be part of it. Security is slightly different, I would say. I think a lot of women probably optimize for security. My wife's a good example. Every decision that she makes around life is about us having the awesome house that we live in, having, the health of, our kids and myself. Like that's all she cares about. So she's going to optimize completely for that. Okay. The hero wants to basically prove their worth. They're driven by status, validation, legacy, celebrity, and recognition. Rocky Balboa and Troy are ones that come to mind. Remember when Troy, Brad Pitt, he kind of they're attacking. I can't remember what it was they were attacking, but they get to this beach and he's like way before everybody else, right? His boat is the first one to land. It's not safe at all. Also incredibly risky. He could have held back, but he's like, I want people to remember my name. That's what he was optimizing for. So why else would you do something like that if you weren't optimizing for something like that? Why would you storm the beach like way before the rest of your support is coming if you weren't trying to do things that were so crazy that people would remember your name? And I understand that it's, fiction, but this is very real. Yeah, so Troy was all about legacy. Rocky probably more about recognition. You can think of a lot of people yourself that are either influencers or just people that that take a lot of selfies, and they're always posting things where you can just tell that they're posting it in a way where they're trying to get people to envy them. This is that person, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just maybe sometimes it comes from the wrong place, where maybe it's like childhood neglect, and now they're trying to make up for it by getting recognition from other people. But it's not inherently wrong, right? So you can very much be about these things without that being a bad thing. The next one is the caregiver. So the caregiver is moved by desire to help and service others. And the visual that comes to mind is like the loving mother taking care of the child, but it does not have to be that. If you think about The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, he's walking around kicking ass, killing people, but he's doing it in service of others. Like he's getting revenge or like helping other people. He just does it in a Denzel Washington kind of a way, right? And the other one is Alfred, the butler in Batman. I just rewatched Batman Begins recently. What a great movie. So is that what your community is about? Is it about service to other people? If so, make it about that. Make everything about that. Make the name about it, the logo, like everything. You know what I mean? Okay, next up, the explorer. So the explorer is moved by the possibility of a more authentic life/freedom. I think of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I think he gets fired. I can't remember if he quits or he gets fired, but he just picks up, packs his bag, starts traveling the world, and just does all these things that he always wanted to do. So that's a big one, by the way. And, we spoke about bikers before. This is the one that bikers are about. Freedom. So a lot of communities, I think, actually come back to the freedom. And that may manifest in different ways. They may use different vehicles. No pun intended. The bikers use the bike as the vehicle. But there are many other types of, freedom-based communities, but they actually look way different than, a biker community. Then you have the outlaw. The outlaw is often motivated by a need to better the world through somewhat questionable means. These are your sort of rebellion, outlaw, radical people. Think about Ocean's 11. Think about Fight Club. They're doing these unethical things. They're trying to sort of get something done and using sort of questionable means. And they're very much driven by this need to sort of like revenge or rebel against something. So Ocean's 11 was very much revenge, right? He stole Julia Roberts, the girlfriend, and so his revenge was, let me rob the casinos. And Fight Club was sort of rebelling against society. Then you have the lover. The lover is all about creating sort of lasting, meaningful relationships. And the example that comes to mind here is Orlando Bloom in Troy. He steals basically Helen of Troy, with her consent, but they get on the boat together and they take away from, where she was, I guess, married to the king. He basically starts an entire war for love. But again, the thing about these archetypes and the core desire is everything else is secondary. They optimize first and foremost for this one thing. So to him, it's worth starting a war if I can get this thing. Next up is the creator. This is your sort of Elon Musk Iron Man. They're sort of focused on examining the boundaries of our reality or perception of our reality. They're trying to sort of push the boundaries and innovate and that sort of thing. The jester. This is, the clown, the trickster, the comedian. and they're very much sort of they're trying to be present in the moment. They're all about like happiness right now, so they're optimizing for now, and they'll give up sort of better things in the future. And the movie that comes to mind is Elf, when Will Ferrell is eating this massive plate of pasta, and it's full of like chocolate syrup and like M&Ms and stuff like that, just completely wild as a meal. And so that's the gesture, very much sort of clown like, living for the moment, happy right now, and everything else is secondary. We got two more. So the magician / the sage. This is very much the archetype that kind of seeks the transformation of the world to fit their vision, kind of like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. And that's another one. Pretty rare, I would say. A lot of those people are incredibly intelligent, and they're just looking for the truth, but it could be based around that. And the last one is the ruler. So the ruler, a little bit similar to the hero, but not necessarily about recognition and so on. They want power, they want wealth. And so think about, your House of Cards with Kevin Spacey, or your Michael Corleone with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And that's the ruler, very much sort of power and wealth focused. And that's it. That's the list of the different core desires and the different names of the archetypes. And you should very much be aware of all of these. And you should have a think about which one, because here's the thing. As I've gone through this list, there is one that is already resonating much more with you than the others. You probably, on some level, like all of these things, but there is one here where you think about it and you realize that a lot of your decision making is optimizing for this one thing. And depending on what kind of project you're in, it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't mean that the one that's yours, the one that you really optimize for, is the one that you now need to go and sort of push on the community. But there is definitely one that is, more prevalent in your own life if you think about it. And chances are, if you already have a project going, there might have been some signs already where there's X amount of people that have already displayed sort of, this is what they're here for. But if you can sort of get a grip on this and really, decide, like make a decision that, okay, I realize that this archetype, let's say the ruler, wealth and power, this has been shown throughout the community already. This is something that I like. I'm just gonna make it about this. I'm gonna double down on this, and from now on, this is like what our community is built around. And what you'll find is you will start to attract only those people, and you will start to repel other people, and the bond will be like 100 times stronger with the people that you actually have. So this is really a huge thing that if you can pull this off, which is not necessarily difficult. The difficult part is like being aware of this knowledge and actually thinking about it for a couple of minutes and then going out there and trying to execute on that. But that should really help you paint a picture of what a community is. It's not social media followers, it's not customers. It is built on a core identity where there's one desire that they're always optimizing for, and you should make a conscious decision that is in line with whatever you have right now, that, hey, this is what we're about, and then you should lean into that, okay? So that is branding, that is community. The two components that we talked about as far as the main differences of Web 2 and Web 3 really came down to the fundamentally different incentive structure, as well as the fact that the competitive advantage has shifted from product to brand and community. I just spent a lot of time talking about how to think about those two. And, I'm writing a book about Web3 marketing. I'll put a link here somewhere. It's not ready yet, but if you want it, you can go sign up for the wait list, and I'll let you know as soon as it's done. I would also love to know, what is your main takeaway from this? What did you learn today? What's the one thing that kind of stood out where you're like, man, that's really cool. I'm taking that with me, and I would love to hear from you. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. We'll see you again in the near future. Ciao.